Hi, I'm Owen from Rask Australia. Thanks for tuning in to the Rask Network. Before we get into today's show, there are a few things we have to go over. Firstly, what you're about to hear and see is limited to general information only. It's not personal financial advice like you'd get from a financial planner. Also, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future performance. That means that anything that's happened in the past, or we say today, is not necessarily going to reflect what happens in the future. Lastly, please consider that any of the guests or myself are featuring on this program may have a financial interest in some of the products or shares mentioned. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed today's program.
Owen, how are you affording life at the moment?
Well, I've got to tell you, Kate, my mortgage is way up, my mortgage payments, that is, and it is hurting the household budget.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're the only ones.
No. I'm sure many other Australians and many of our listeners have felt the pinch over the last few months and are kind of wondering, why does everything feel a bit tougher right now and what can I do about it?
So this episode is all about talking about the cost of living, and the inspiration comes from Reddit, Kate.
Yes, I don't know what led me to being on Reddit. I don't usually go on there, but I was on there for a quick second, and one of the questions that I saw was sort of blowing up at the time on the Oz Finance thread, which, be careful.
Yeah.
But anyway, the question was, how do people afford well life? And with everything going on right now, they're on 70K and they're struggling to save anything each month. And they're kind of just wondering, like, how on earth is everyone doing it? How is everyone paying for mortgages and cars and holidays? And it seems like everyone's in Europe over the past few months. Like, how are people affording it right now?
Yeah. And this person does say, they're on 70K, which is pretty respectable. It's pretty good. And they're in their late 30s and they just genuinely don't understand how people have money for cars and a mortgage. Like, how do you do it? That would have been a great conversation starter, so I'll put the link in the show notes. But if this is like something that's on your mind, I think people can write into us. They can leave comments in Spotify, wherever you get your Rask content. You can write into us basically if you're on Instagram, whatever. And it's a real thing, right? Like all of us, we talk every week, 2 or 3 times a week here on the Australian Finance Podcast about this exact thing. And how that relates to then doing other things with your money, like travel, like investing. But I've always wondered, how do people afford those really expensive cars? Like
Probably a loan.
Probably a loan, yeah. So we just don't know, right? Like there's so many of those nice cars, like Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, everywhere on the road. And I just think to myself, I don't understand. So this episode is dedicated not just to that, but to everyone that's thinking, how on earth do we actually make ends meet and live a good life at the end of the day? And we'll cover a few things that you've covered in your book. So get a copy of Kate's book if you are interested in buying happiness or just being happy and intentional with money. Kate, where do we start?
I think the first place we should start is, why do things feel a bit tougher right now than they did a few years ago?
Yeah, sure. Well, I had to use the word unprecedented, but there it is. We went through a pandemic, and that had huge implications for everything that we do around the world. Some people will remember the cost of lettuces at Coles or Woolworths or Aldi or wherever you get your lettuce was up $7, $8. We've seen it more recently in different types of products. So, for example, if you work in construction, we've seen the price of steel and timber go up 30, 40, 50, 80% sometimes. And that's what we call inflation. Inflation is just this general term that refers to things getting more expensive. Now, in those instances, there was a shock to the system. Obviously, COVID caused supplier routes and that sort of thing to break down. And what it resulted in is a shortage of those key inputs. At the same time, people were getting stimulus from the government. So you might remember you got a check from the government, or you got job seeker, job keeper. And the economy tended to tick over, with one difference being that ultimately there was less stuff and more money. So we're seeing that now in this person's comment from Reddit. We're seeing people take overseas holidays. We're seeing people buy cars. And we've kind of got over that kind of honeymoon period. And now everyone's thinking, well, hold on a second. Now I can't afford it.
Because savings went up quite a lot during COVID.
Savings went up a massive way. And I'm in a massive way. And I'm glad you brought that up, Kate, because it was a record, as far as I know, for all the data that I could find in Australian history. During COVID, the household savings rate, which is an economic metric that we talk about in the news a bit, and this is basically the amount of income that people keep. Like they save, literally save.
So they're not needing it for rent. They're not spending it on restaurants, but they're just keeping it in their savings account.
That went up to nearly 25%. So imagine everyone in Australia, this is literally what it tells you, was saving nearly 25% of what they were earning. Now, you might say that the long-term average is between 5 and 11%, somewhere in that range. So this was more than double the savings rate. And you'd have to go back to the 1970s to see households saving anything like that. So we haven't experienced anything like this. And what happened is everyone had all of this money saved up. And so what do? They spend it. So we've seen household savings now plummet because people have spent it, but also interest rates have gone way up because they were spending, which caused inflation.
Yeah, and anyone with a mortgage as well has felt that recently.
Yeah, so now, fast forward just 2 years, and the savings rate has gone from near 25% to around about 4.6%, which is, I would say, below average. So now we're seeing the opposite impact. And the fluctuation in the economy means that people were spending a lot, which pushed prices up, but they weren't getting the pay rise. So that's why it feels like you're not getting ahead. And we know from all of this, the data, that some of the biggest things that people spend money on, housing. So whether you've got a mortgage or rent, that's been in the news a lot lately. And I think I've told you, my mortgage every month has gone up over $1,000. And that's a typical mortgage for Melbourne, where I live, right? That's $1,000 just extra going to the bank that I could be investing, that I could be spending. The other thing that people spend money on is groceries. That's typically the second biggest stressor after where you live. And the third thing is vehicles and transport. If anyone's been to the Bowser lately, like the petrol station, you'll know it's over $2 a litre. So the three biggest things in our lives have all got more expensive. At the same time, our wages have not gone up anywhere near as fast.
And so that's why things feel tighter, because all the things that we have to spend money on that we don't really have that much discretion over, like we need somewhere to live, we need food, we need to pay our bills, those costs have gone up, and our wages, we might have got a small pay rise, but on average haven't gone up as much.
Yeah, and this is the thing that you see is the only way that people are really getting pay rises at the moment is by switching jobs, but that carries with it so much risk. For example, if you're a first home buyer and you're thinking, I want to buy a property, if you switch jobs, that might have implications on how much you can borrow, even if you're paid more, because you might be in a probationary period. If you're, say, in a really good job and you think it's great, you might go to a new company and you think, I really hate this. The culture's terrible here. You might get more money, but is it better for you? And so without people getting pay rises, basically they seem like they're falling behind. But that might not always be the case, Kate. We know that wages do tend to go up. In this person's case, they've said, on 70K, depending on where they are in their career, that could go up over the next 5 years. Or in fact, I would almost bet it would go up over the next 5 years. And I would say that the days of $8 or $9 lettuces are behind us, at least for the foreseeable future. So that's good news.
Yeah, and more people are hustling behind the scenes. So they've got their 9-to-5 job, and they're also doing something for a bit of extra money on the side, whether it's delivering Uber Eats meals to people or copywriting or something like that.
Yeah. And so we've seen this in our own community data, people doing side hustles, people thinking about starting businesses, which obviously is a risk in itself. But we've seen people doing this in order to earn more, to save more, or to invest more. And sometimes side hustles aren't always the thing that you can do long term, but maybe they're a thing that you can do now to meet a savings goal or to get through this period. Because if you look at the economic data, and this is the last thing we'll talk about maybe for this part, but it looks like, we don't know for sure, but it looks like interest rates have had their impact, as in people are struggling, just like this. And what that means is that it's unlikely they'll continue to go higher as long as we've got inflation under control, which it seems we have for now. We're recording this in early September, so keep that in mind. But it seems like we might have been through the really hard part, and now it's just important to keep your job, keep earning, and follow the steps we're about to lay out.
Yeah, and one of the things I really wanted to share before we jump into some more specific ways you can reduce your cost of living at the moment is the importance of having balance, because it's really important not to sacrifice everything to reach a saving or investing goal or pay off your mortgage and not actually have enjoyment in the meantime. And one way you can do that is by finding some lower cost ways to boost your happiness. So you still might be spending a bit of time or a bit of money, but there's a lot of things you can do that are a lot more affordable or focus more on your time side of things that you don't have to spend as much money on to go out to the big show. Or if you can't afford the holiday this year, how can you add some other things? And so when I was doing the research for Buying Happiness, I asked you to share some of those low-cost happiness boosters, and I thought we could share a few in this episode.
Yeah, sure. So this is for Kate's book, Buying Happiness. Get it at all good bookstores. There are many different things that people wrote in, and I was so surprised. So many people, hundreds of people wrote in with their tips. Here's a good one that I know you'll like. Buying a serve of hot chips brought them happiness. I think that brings most people happiness.
Every time. Schnitz, grilled.
It's a pretty low-cost
fish and
way
chip shop.
to get happiness from your money when you think about it.
We had some good chips in Townsville the other week.
Yes. Oh, great chips in Townsville.
On the
Shout
water.
out to Queensland. There's another great place down here in Victoria I know of as well. There's people on Instagram.
You can't say the great place in Victoria and not say what it is.
Well, I mean, you could go anywhere, but if you're down near San Remo near Phillip Island in Victoria, there's a great fish and chip shop just as you go over the bridge onto Phillip Island, where the Grand Prix is, of course. But there are so many ways you can spend money and feel better, and it doesn't have to cost the earth.
Yeah, one of them was buying a book from an op shop and having time to read it on the weekends. Someone else said parkrun every Saturday with friends. That's a free activity. You can volunteer, you can get involved, you get to run, maybe you catch up for coffee or breakfast at someone's house afterwards.
Yeah, when we've done these types of discussions in the past, we always refer people back to our episodes where we talk about creating a vision board and talking about how and why you actually do the things you do with money, living intentionally. So if this person that was in Reddit walked into the studio with us right now, would say, well, what do you like to do? And we would sit down with them and say, what do you want to spend your days doing more of? And if you just start with why, as the book goes, you'll probably find that like a morning coffee from the cafe across the road on the weekend, which is another one of these, that might be the thing that you're happy to spend money on. Whereas you might look around and see the person with the BMW or the Mercedes-Benz and you think, well, that's actually not going to bring me happiness, but this will.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get caught up on social media and looking at everyone around you and you just don't know where they're coming from. They might be in a lot of debt. They might have received a significant gift or a payout from someone else. And so if you're comparing where you are right now to what they're spending their money on and they have completely different financial priorities, different dreams, a different why, then you can feel like you're behind and you're not able to do as many things. Whereas you might not actually want the big car and the big house and to go to Europe this year. You might actually want to do a lot of other things.
There are so many things on this list, Case. We've mentioned this before. I was just going through the list of things that people have written in. A lot of things to do with socializing, like finding innovative ways to socialize. Coffee is obviously one of those things, but a lot of the things are getting out in nature as well.
Yeah.
Nature being free to get out into.
Going geocaching with my nephew is one of them, and that's a free activity I did when I was a kid. I didn't realize it was still around, but
what does it actually mean
fun.
For those of us that don't know what that means?
It was this website and it would tell you clues and coordinates and you'd have to go on a mission to find this object that was hidden. And then you'd either write your name on it or say that you found it on the website or something like that. So these like little
gets you out.
Objects or things hidden in plain sight.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. And I can see things like getting a pizza on the beach, sitting and watching the sunset. So many things. A morning coffee, coffee is life. So many things that you can do that maybe, sure, there's a little bit of an expense, but it's probably the things that are richer in your life and bring you more happiness. So, Kate, let's go back to this poster on Reddit. They've said, how do people afford life? Which is a fair question. Where do we start?
I think the first place to start is just understanding where you are at right now. And so things might have crept up on you over the last 12 months. If you had automated some of those bills like your rent and your electricity, the costs may have gone up and it's just automatically been taking those payments out of your bank account. And suddenly you're realizing, oh, my savings plan isn't quite working anymore and I'm not able to save that much every month. So reassessing and having a really clear understanding of what is coming into my financial life right now? What is my income? Do I have any extra dividends? Do I have any side hustle income? Like really understanding that side of the equation and then also understanding what's coming out because it's probably gone up over the last 12 months. Getting really solid, going through the last 1 to 3 months of your bank statements. If you can use a tool to make that easier, even better. But running through and going, where is my money going? What are the major categories that my money is getting spent on?
Yeah. And it's a revealing thing, but anyone can do this no matter what your level of income, just to kind of rip that Band-Aid off. It is pretty painful. I know the experience, trust me. And it hurts to look at it sometimes, and that's okay. But if it hurts, it means something's hidden beneath the surface that you could maybe fix up a little bit. But I think you mentioned something before, which is obviously most important, which is just to remember that you are you, as Evan would say, who's on the show regularly. You are you. This idea that everyone's different and everyone walks a different life. Some people start ahead of the start line. Some people start behind it. Some people are grinding away. Some people are risk-seeking, some people are not. And so everyone is different, and that's where the activity of just focusing on yourself is so important.
And even getting a better understanding of what are the expenses that are really essential expenses. Yeah. Sometimes you've got a bit of wiggle room with them, but not always. What are those expenses that just sort of make life more comfortable? Like they're really good things you like spending money on, but they're not essential. And then what sort of expenses would you consider more luxury? Because that will help you figure out what levers you can pull if you are getting a bit behind at the moment, or you don't think you're reaching your saving and investing goals.
Yeah. So many different ways of doing this. Like you said, you can use the tools or you can just categorize them. And then what you can do is you can actually start a new bank account. Like you can go and create a new bank account and you can kind of start afresh. And you can change things like direct deposits. If it's like a luxury item, maybe you have a certain budget for that and that only comes from this one account. Or maybe you have a long-term savings goal and that only goes into this one account. And so you can separate basically from scratch what you want to do and how you want to spend money and how you want to live your life.
And some people find writing down all of their expenses each day a really helpful activity to be more intentional about where they're spending money, because it's so easy to just tap your card, to have automated payments and lose track and sort of not connect with your money that's coming in and out of your bank account. But writing it down and going, today I paid $50 for my NBN. Today I paid $30 for a burger and chips on the beach, and sort of reflecting on that experience. I know we've had Emma Edwards on the show before, and she's created a great spending journal as well to help you really dig into those purchases and figure out, is this something that brought me added value in my life?
Yeah, and the thing is, right, you don't have to do this forever.
Yeah.
You can just do it for a few days, a week, a month, whatever.
It's like a chance to reset, because things have changed over the last few years. So this might, if you haven't checked in with your finances recently, this could be a good time to do so.
Yeah, and you referenced Emma Edwards from Broke Generation there. Another good one for this is, I remember when we first interviewed Melissa Brown from the Money Bar. Melissa said that, she calls it a detox. You kind of just put yourself through, and some people do this regularly. Some people do it once or twice a year for a few weeks just to see what's happening. It's kind of a chance to reset. It's like me and my fitness pal. It's like a love-hate relationship. I have to just, it takes a bit of time to get going.
My fitness pal is very revealing.
It is. And I don't set expectations just to try and form that habit earlier on, until I then look at it and go, okay, wow. But I never hard on myself when I do it. And that's important. I don't have to do it all the time.
And being kind to yourself during this process, especially if you are disappointed that the goals you set for your finances in January are not things you can reasonably meet anymore, because things just might have changed to the point where your income and your expenses are getting very close together. There isn't that many more cuts you can make. You haven't been able to get a pay rise this year. And so you might be in a spot where you've had to cut back your investing goal from $500 a month to $500 a quarter or something like that. And I think Evan and I have an episode coming out soon or before this. I lose track sometimes, but that's talking about how do we manage those feelings and the emotions when we have to press pause or reduce our saving or investing goals, because we have a great idea, we put a plan together, we're fired up to achieve this goal, and then suddenly life happens, or in this circumstance could just creep up on you, and you have to pull back. And that's a hard emotional journey to go through.
Absolutely it is. It is so hard. And particularly if you're in a partner, if you're in a couple, as I kind of joke sometimes, the world is built for couples, like the financial world is built for couples, and that does enable you to maybe have a little bit more income.
Yeah, I was just looking at the veggie subscription boxes before. It's a much better deal if you have someone to share the cost with.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And so these are the things like that are like a depending on people's situations, the strategies can be different. And if you are aware of that, maybe you don't have to be as hard on yourself, but maybe there's an advantage that you have that maybe someone else doesn't have too.
On that point, it could be quite helpful to find a friend to reduce some of the expenses with. So if you are living by yourself and you don't have a flatmate or a partner to cut costs with, you could get something like a veggie subscription box and share it between the two of you. Or you could meal prep together and cook a bigger quantity of meals and share the cost. And even things like subscription services, some of them you can share costs, some you can't, but it's finding someone to help break those costs down a little bit with.
Yeah, I think the old subscription costs, I think Netflix has caught up with most of Australia and realised, hey, how can 7 households be using the same account? That doesn't make any sense. But Netflix may have caught up with it, but many other things haven't. So you can
a lot
buy
of
in
things
bulk.
like newspapers where it's a digital
For example,
login.
a Costco subscription, most people have to pay their $60 a year membership fee, but the savings are stupendous. So maybe you can only have one Costco subscription per household, or you have to have a subscription per the address. Well, maybe you go with a friend that has the Costco subscription and you shop together as a really easy way to get around it. And let's be honest, you can't eat 2 kilos of Chupa Chups in one go anyway. So
that was a weird example to pick on. But you should have gone the massive pack of croissants.
Oh, yes. Or anything. They're incredible there. So I need to go back there. But in any case, one of the things that happens is you do need to be kind to yourself, as you mentioned before. But this idea of keeping up with the Joneses is so important. So a lot of people, they see their friends just bought a new car, or that person has a house, or they're doing a renovation, or they're going overseas, or, insert whatever. And it's really easy to get envious.
Yeah.
And it's really important that when you do the activities that we lay out on the show so often, is that it's okay once you realize what matters to you, a lot of that kind of envy goes away because you actually realize, well, hey, the car's not that important to me, but you know what is? I'm going to go skiing in New Zealand in about 6 months. And a lot of the times when we think about people having these issues with the world and like not being able to afford things, it's because they haven't done the exercise of actually just figuring out what's important to them. And once they do that, budgeting no longer becomes, what am I sacrificing? It's so negative. It actually becomes, well, hey, yeah, I'm not buying the coffee today because I'm going out on the weekend and that brings me more happiness.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that rearranging.
And it really matters who you're surrounding yourself with. So if all of your family members are on really high incomes, they've got the big house, they've got the car, they're doing the holidays, then you can feel like you're very far behind because you're spending time with these people, and like same with friendship groups and things. So coming back to working out your why, but even on social media, if you're watching people and you're feeling maybe a bit envious, or if it's taking you off track towards your financial goals, the mute button's great. Unsubscribing from marketing emails for things that might take you off track from reaching your financial goals, use that too. You can, these digital tools, you don't have to let them use you. You can start using them. You can control what you see and what you view.
Yeah, that's a really good safeguard to put in place. Obviously, technology and everything's all around us these days. The media, whether that's the traditional media or social media, it's all around us. And so it's just being mindful of the stimulus you're letting into your life and into your brain. Like that, if you're being stimulated by something that maybe isn't healthy for you long term, reach out to people, talk to people, see what strategies are available. A great feature of the iPhone is you can limit how much time in advance you're going to spend on something, right? If only we could do that for our budget. Like a lot of people don't have the kind of restraint to be like, I'm only spending this much, and then they go and find more time or more money.
CBA has introduced some features like spending caps.
They have, and your friend has to, was that Upbank? Where your friend has to approve it?
I think there was a Vault savings account, but even just on the CBA cards, you can put caps on. And because I had to pay for a more expensive bill recently, and I put a cap on because I was just worried about getting scammed or anything like that. And it rejected it because it got a notification saying this payment would take you over your spending cap for the month. So there's sort of safeguards that other institutions are allowing you to put to control your spending a little bit more.
And something that works here is like you find that buddy that can go with you on this journey. If you do have that, whether it's your partner or even just a friend, like they say that when you go to the gym and you have a friend to do the weights or to do the running with you, you'll be much more likely to actually go and do it. And so maybe you do have someone in your life that you can share that with, and you can say, hey, this is how I did this week. I think we should all have in our lives someone that we can tell anything to and know that it's going to be kept with them. It doesn't have to be family, because sometimes family become a bit of a blabberguts, but just it gets let out. But maybe find that person and see if they're interested in this thing. So the next thing, Kate, is paying off those costly debts. We talk about this a lot. If you're in this situation where you feel like things are expensive, interest rates being high means debt works against you.
Yes. So it's really important to figure out how you can come up with a plan to work towards paying off your debts. And that can feel really hard right now. We do recommend speaking to financial counsellors, free, confidential in Australia, fantastic service. We've also got a free getting and staying out of debt course, because that's sort of the other side of the equation. You might pay off your buy now, pay later accounts, but if you don't learn the skills of saving up for something that you want and learning how to put money aside and budget so that you've got money left over each month, you might end up going back to those platforms.
Easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
Right. One thing that you can do, and you interviewed Joel Gibson, author, on the show before.
Kill bills?
Kill bills, yep. Kill your bills, something like that. And we've bought the book for people on the roadshow, actually, which has been a bit of fun. And obviously a cull of bills. Interesting ways to save. You can pick up his book. But there are some really interesting, quick and easy ways to do that, Kate.
Yeah, I think the first one, anyone in Australia can head to the website Energy Made Easy. It's created by the Australian government to help you review your electricity and gas bills. That's a really good place to start. You can find out if you're on a good deal right now or if there's something even better. And if you're in Victoria, you can go straight to the Victorian Energy Compare website. And if you haven't already claimed and you're eligible, you can get a $250 bonus just for heading to the website and comparing your current energy rates.
Interesting. Some things should be automated and some things shouldn't, Kate. We are big fans of automation when it comes to our money. Out of sight, just let it run in the background. But there are some things that shouldn't. One of those things is car insurance or just any type of insurance, health insurance. Obviously, there are certain risks if you do change providers, so you want to know those in advance.
Yeah, I'd definitely say with some of those insurances, you want to think about it and just double check and talk about the waiting periods. Sometimes you can actually talk to the new health insurance provider and even negotiate with them and say, if I move across from X provider to you, will you waive the waiting periods for me?
Yep. Easy way to just find out what's happening. Obviously, read the PDS. However, a lot of those insurances have something called a loyalty tax where you pay more if you stay with them, which sounds kind of bizarre. So what we say, set a reminder in your calendar. It goes off every year, maybe a week or two out before your insurance rolls over, and see if there's a better deal available to you. Chances are if you're a good driver, if you've had no issues, maybe there's a better deal. Same with your internet, your home phone, all that sort of stuff. Final one from me is I remember going to JB Hi-Fi not too long ago, and I was able to take advantage of one of their kind of cashback promotions where you can rejoin basically, or get a new phone, and you get a huge cashback. Or you sign up to the Telstra network today, and you get a huge cashback, or Optus. Doesn't matter what it is, but have a look at those things, because sometimes if you're going to buy a phone anyway, or you're going to get a mobile phone plan, those things are worth it, and huge cash savings up for grabs.
Yeah, and there's so many white labeled Telstra plans now that you can get the same level of service on a much cheaper deal, and they often will provide you a crazy sign-up bonus in terms of hundreds of extra gigabytes if you get a 6-month plan and things like that. So there's so much more flexibility than there was 10 years ago when it comes to mobile phone plans.
Yeah. And finally, shout out to anyone that does have a mortgage. Many of the Australian Finance Podcast listeners know that we have a partnership now with the team at Blusk. Chris Bates, who founded Blusk and still runs it today, is my mortgage broker. How's this? Just voted the number one mortgage broker in Australia out of all 15 or 16,000 or however many they are. So I'm super pumped and proud of Chris and just stoked that he's my mortgage broker. But you can get in contact with Chris. There's always a link in the show notes.
So you're pretty sure you're getting the best rate, even though I know your rate's gone up quite a lot over the last few years.
Gone up. Yeah, he does it. His team do this automated thing where they send you an email proving to you that they've compared your loan to the other loans in the market, and they say, I can't remember if it's swap or stay. They have a thing, and it's just a really simple email to tell you whether you should swap or stay. But it doesn't have to be Chris or Blusk, anyone. Speak to your mortgage broker. Speak to your bank. The old, hashtag get a better rate.
Is that a hashtag?
Yeah. Scott Phillips from the Motley Fool is pushing it on Twitter. At least I know that much. But at the end of the day, your mortgage or your rent is a huge cost to pay, right? It's probably the biggest cost in your life right now. So see what you can do. We've had conversations in the past about maybe you can lock in a rate with your landlord, prove to them how good you are, maybe give them a bit of certainty, all of these different types of things. So get onto that, get on top of it. It will be the big thing that changes your finances today.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of my friends recently, the landlord was trying to put up their rent by, I think, about $100 a week, which is quite substantial over a month.
Yeah.
And they were building up a case of to all the things wrong with the property that they were happily dealing with and all these costs for them to get a new tenant. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. But it was very detailed, this document. So
dig their heels in. I like it. So the next thing is let's say whether you've got a mortgage or you're renting, you've probably got an emergency fund. What do you do with that cash?
Yes. So making sure right now that you're getting the best deal on your savings account or your term deposit, whatever you're using to store your emergency fund, your savings for Europe next year, or just your cash. So have a look. There's heaps of websites to compare these days, or you can just head to some of the bigger providers, but sort of bring your attention to places like Ubank, ING, Macquarie, UpMoney, Bank of Queensland. They've all been offering quite competitive interest rates on savings accounts recently. Sometimes there's better offers if you're under 30 or you've only got a smaller balance under $50,000, which is quite big, but for the bank, it's small. Yeah. And there's better rates available. So just make sure you look at all the requirements. So ING have quite a few requirements to get that bonus interest rate. Yeah. You have to make a certain number of transactions and add to the account. So just make sure you can achieve those requirements before you switch.
Yeah. Another one is if you've got a mortgage, chances are you've got an offset account. If you haven't, speak to your broker or speak to your bank. You should get one for free. Honestly, it's the year 2023. You should have an offset account or multiple offset accounts attached to your mortgage. The basic principle of an offset account is this. You don't actually earn interest. You just save from paying extra interest on your mortgage. So it's kind of offsetting that interest. And typically the interest rate on a mortgage is higher than it is on the savings account, hence why it's a good deal, as well as you don't pay tax on saving money. So keep that in mind. We've done separate episodes on that in the past. We don't have affiliation with any bank, we might say. Kate, at the beginning of the year, we also do these episodes. It's a bit of a play on numbers or a bit of play on years. 23 saving and investing ideas for 2023 was the one this year. People can go back and refer to that for just a heap of different ways. We did it last year as well, maybe even the year before. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's been 3 years running that I had a look through the other day and there's still plenty of good saving and investing ideas in there. So some were crowdsourced from the community. There's an episode and an article to go with that. So if you're looking for some extra ideas, I'd highly recommend starting there. But even just the biggest one that's helping me save money and helping my friends and family save money at the moment is finding lower cost ways to do the same thing. So if you in the past, you would have gone out to a restaurant and had 3-course meal with friends or family, how can you do that and still have the fun experience, spend time with people, have a relatively stress-free evening, lower cost? Well, one way that I've been doing with my friends is everyone brings a dish over to someone's house and maybe it's board games or a movie night or something like that. Someone brings a bottle of rosé and that splits the cost and it makes it more fun. Or even cooking burgers or doing a barbecue in the park. Now the weather's getting better. You'd definitely be fine up in Queensland. That was really warm the other week.
It's beautiful.
But finding ways to still have that same experience and the feeling and the gathering, and keeping it relatively easy, because I think that's one of the reasons we do often go out with groups of friends to a restaurant, because someone just needs to book and tell everyone the date and time and it's relatively easy. So pick easy things to do.
It's like, and a lot of life coaches do this, but it's like that, I'm going to bring it up, the Mr. Money Mustache is one of the big original bloggers on finance from the United States. He says, only suckers think of the restaurant as a source of food. And what he's basically saying is most people who think they need to spend money in order to eat haven't picked up on what's happening. You actually spend money and go to a restaurant for the experience. Now, if you think about that for a second, there are so many things that you pay money for, but what you're actually getting is an experience. So in your case, you got people coming around, you're watching a movie. What's the alternative to that? Most people would think, well, I have to go to the movies to get the same experience.
Yeah.
But you don't. What's bringing you happiness is being around friends, having a glass of rosé and watching a movie. You already pay for Netflix. You've already got a stove. Get your friends to share the cost. It's the same thing, but you're saving money.
Yeah,
and this is what we mean.
Picnics at the park, walks at park, barbecues outside, because I know a lot of my friends, they couldn't fit maybe more than 10 people in their living room and kitchen area. So if space is an issue, well, can you find a larger public area that you can use?
And then treat yourself to that night out once a month, just not every week. And you'll probably save, $300 or $400 depending on how much you spend. And chances are there's some great ways to, do those things from home. I was telling you guys the other day, you can actually buy almost every single movie that's ever been made on YouTube. You can actually just buy the movie, or you can rent it.
And Monique and I both thought Owen was very strange renting movies for YouTube. Like, no one does that.
No one does it except for me. But you can do that. If you want a movie that's maybe just coming out or something like that, you can do it. And I sometimes do it when it's not available, like on a subscription platform. Sit back, have some popcorn, pop your own popcorn, and away you go. It's great fun. So,
and if you are eating out, there's also a website called First Table where they're trying to fill up. Restaurants try to fill up the early spot, like 5:30 or 6 p.m, and you get 50% off if you take that seating and you go through this website. So I saw an email the other day because they had only recently launched in Melbourne, but they're all over the world.
First Table,
as far as I can tell. So if anyone uses that, let me know.
Yeah, let us know. There's another one called Eat Now. Remember that one?
Is it Eat Club?
Eat Club. Sorry, Eat Club. Yeah, I think it may be. Which is basically the same thing. You can look on the map, it's like a Google map. It's kind of like looking for an Uber on your map. And it will pop up with different savings then and there. And it sometimes will only be available for half an hour. You can go to the local Chinese restaurant, and because there's no one there, they've put the special on the app. And people just flock in. They go, I'm using this app. They scan your app and you get 30% off, just like that.
Up to 50% off total bill, including drinks.
There you go.
Why haven't we used this as a team?
I know. Tell me about it. I used to use it a lot before COVID. So I think it's a great deal.
Over 2,500 restaurants across Australia, 2 million customers, an Australian startup founded in 2018, Eat Club. I'll put it in the show notes, but we should try it tomorrow.
I think it started, I could be wrong, sorry, Eat Club. I think it started around Melbourne, but then it slowly made its way up the coasts and around Australia. And it's awesome. It is awesome. And it has some really good recommendations in there as well.
Oh, it's got Abacus on there.
Yeah, it's got some really nice places. So the second thing that we probably want to say here is just think about the way you spend money as well. Maybe there's a way that you need to get that thing, but maybe there's a better way of doing it. Fresh fruit and vegetables would be a good example.
Yeah, so if you're noticing particular areas of your budget are very costly at the moment, are there some areas where you can still eat well, shop well, but in a more sustainable way? So I've been sort of particularly looking at groceries and things like that. And sometimes there's farmers markets where you can get much better deals on fruit and veggies. It's healthier, it's fresher, and you can pay a lot less for it. Like at the farmers market the other day, I got 2 avocados for $1, and I was only having to pay $1 or $2 for broccolis and cauliflowers, big bunches of kale, and then you can make big healthy quiches and meal prep for the week. So a lot of friends swear by Aldi.
Well, see, I can't remember the exact statistic. This is going back maybe 4 or 5 years now when I last read this, but I think around about 22 to 24% of Australians make the decision of where they shop solely based on location. And it's normally convenience, right? Like you go to the Woolies because it's the closest. You would go to Coles, but it's an extra 5 minutes away kind of thing. But what I do is, because I know Aldi's cheaper. Everyone knows Aldi's cheaper. Like, come on. And Costco, if you buy in bulk, is cheaper. Everyone knows this. But not a lot of people do it because of that convenience factor. So what I do is I try and get the best of both worlds. If I'm buying something that it's going to be like it's fresh fruit and veg, I'll probably go and buy it from Woolies or Coles, right? But if I'm buying something that's not perishable, so like a can of baked beans, or I love to put linseed, soy and almond or walnuts in my smoothie every day, that stuff's super expensive. So I'll go to Aldi and I'll go once a month, but I'll go to Woolies, every week. So I can still change the shopping habit a little bit, but I get the benefit of shopping it where it's lower.
Yeah,
cost.
and if something's non-perishable, if you see it half price, you can stock up on 5 of that item if you're in a position where you can do that, and that saves you a lot of money as well.
Yeah, I always get that Serena tuna, I've got to say. It's my favorite, and it's super expensive, so when it's on sale, you better watch out. So the final thing is find a low-cost hobby. I know you do park runs and that sort of stuff with friends, which as far as I'm aware, it doesn't cost you anything other than maybe a coffee afterwards. These are types of things that anyone can do, and there are so many good things out there.
Yeah, whether it's a local sports club or, I don't know, maybe there's a coffee catch-up walk group near you running. I know a lot of the financial independence groups do regular catch-ups as well, so finding whether it's an online community that does some in-person meetups. I know a lot of people who use the Meetup app to find groups and communities with similar interests to them.
Yeah, I remember we had an event in Sydney. This is going back before COVID. And I was just chatting to someone that come to the event. It was a Rask event. And this guy walks in and he starts talking to me and he's like, oh, what brings you to the event? I'm like, oh, just it's really good to put on an event. And then the other guy goes, you know that like this is like the Rask event? And he was like, oh, cool. What does that mean? I just saw it on Meetup. Like I got my ticket through Meetup. I didn't know like what to expect. I just rocked up. And I was like, oh, cool. People are actually using that to find events that are free or even ticketed in their area. And it's such a good way to build that. What we wanted to mention was like community, to find people who share similar values. Maybe it's on Reddit, maybe it's listening to this podcast, maybe it's coming to one of our events or whatever the case, a sporting group, whatever the case, there are people out there who want to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of smaller groups. So instead of just maybe you can't afford to go to the big musical in Melbourne or Sydney, but there's smaller local productions that, while they might not be as amazing as Wicked in Sydney, I expect is going to be this year, they're still fantastically put on. You're supporting small local groups, you're supporting emerging artists. So whether it's the Fringe Festival in Melbourne coming up, you can find more affordable ways to still have a great night out.
Yeah, the Australian Shareholders Association, who's a sponsor of our Australian Investors podcast, once you get a membership to them, like a yearly membership, you can go to basically any of the events that are run around the country in small towns, big towns.
Yeah, they have monthly investor clubs all over the place.
Yeah, and it's a great way to meet people young and old. As they talk about investing, they talk about what's going on in the stock market or property or whatever you're interested in. So go and check that out. Finally, we've got 2 more things to get across here. For anyone that does feel like they're thinking, everything's getting so expensive, I feel like I can't manage. One is to increase your income. And I know that sounds simple, so hear us out.
Yeah. It was quite interesting in that Reddit thread. A lot of people were saying, I'm sorry to say, but you just have to earn more. And that is a hard sort of phrase to deal with, especially if you're in an area where it's harder to increase your income. But if you are in an industry where it is possible to increase your income on a yearly or every second year basis, thinking about how you can put together a case for a pay rise and collecting all of that great customer feedback you get, any positive recommendations from team members, as much evidence to support your case as possible. So your manager isn't going to remember all the great things you've done during the year, but if you can put a file together and present that as a case and learn about the industry trends, like your role at your level, is it more valuable outside of the workplace? Well, maybe that's part of your case for a pay rise as well.
And it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you just tell them like all the good things you're doing and you've taken on those responsibilities, it would only seem fair. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, but at least you're putting your best foot forward. And then you know what? At least you've got a good record of things that you can take to another employer or, shop your wares around, You can look at other strategies in the next year. So at least you've put it together, you've put the time in. And it's funny that they say that in the Reddit community because there's the famous old financial planning joke. There aren't many, but here's one of them. And it's I had a client come in the other day and I told them to earn more. And it's a joke that financial planners tell. Trust me, a lot of deaf ears here in the studio. But it's a joke that they tell because there's really only 2 things you can do. You can either spend less or earn more. So some people don't realize their value. And so this is one way to do that.
And the pay rise doesn't always have to be financial. It could be an extra day of annual leave each month. It could be some funds from a different part of the budget that you can use to do an additional course or qualification. That could mean you can be paid more at a different role in the future. You
might want to study. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of people that listen to this show that might be interested in doing something like an MBA, like a Masters of Business. You've never done that before and your employer says, well, you're a manager. This is probably going to be useful for you in your career. How about this? Instead of giving you a $5,000 pay rise, maybe we'll give you $5,000 of education budget to use over the next year. You think, great, I'll go and take 1 or 2 of these units, see if it's for me, and then continue it if I want to. But that's a great way. You can reduce your hours. Maybe you get Friday afternoons off. Wouldn't that be great? And so you can be flexible. And I think what you're getting at, Kate, is that like you've got to be aware of what the business is going through as well. I think if you come in swinging, you've got all these things, I want a 40% pay rise, and you realize that Jill down the hallway has just been let go because the business is struggling. Maybe not the right strategy. So thinking outside the box. Like
and ultimately, you might work out that to get a better pay rise and to be more in line with everyone else in the same role, in the same industry, I do have to leave and look for a new job. And that's how I can get a substantial pay rise that helps me reach my goals because it's just not working right now.
Yeah.
And that's a valid reason to change jobs.
Yeah. Finally, you're looking around. Gavin's got his BMW. Sally's over in Europe. You're thinking everyone else seems to be coping just fine, but here I am. And once you've done all these steps, you might go one of two ways, Kate. You might become that person that's just like addicted to saving money, or the person that's out there just focused on money. And we don't think that probably either of those two things are very helpful long term.
Yeah, you really need to find a sustainable balance. You might be able to cut all of your spending on fun things for 6 months to supercharge reaching a specific financial goal, but that's not something you can maintain long term. So finding ways to make sure your budget's sustainable and that it's not just something that's, maybe you'll be able to achieve it once in 1 month-long period, but it would be super difficult for you to continue doing that every month. So finding a balance between reducing your expenses and also finding ways to increase your income. And that might not be through your 9 to 5. It also might be through a side hustle to get some additional funds to support your goals. But you also, maybe it's a time right now that during this next 12 months, you do have to reduce your goals. You can't save as much because your mortgage has gone up
goalposts
significantly.
have shifted. Yeah.
And that's okay, but sort of readjusting to that new level and being okay with where you are now and maybe a plan to change it in the next 12 months.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day as a relatively new homeowner over the last couple of years. I was thinking, like a year ago, I would just go and buy like the potting mix if I wanted. I don't know what I'd be doing with a potting mix bag, but I would just go and buy that.
You do buy weird things sometimes.
Or I would just go and buy, you know, a piece of timber and make something. Or I would go and replace that thing in the house. Now I'm thinking I'm a lot more aware of where that spending goes because I just don't have the funds available. Like my mortgage, to be specific, I think it's gone up $1,400 a month because we were one of those wonderful people who rolled off a fixed interest rate on our mortgage to a variable interest rate that was much higher. And now I don't have that extra amount of money to go and do those things. And it's easy to beat yourself up about that, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do. There's actually nothing you can do about it. And so it's
especially if you want to keep the house.
Especially if you want to keep the house. You could sell the house and go and live in Bali or something like that. But at the end of the day, you know, there's a circle of things that you can control and there are certain things you can influence, but there are many things you can't control in finance. And so being aware of what you can control, what you can influence, you've probably heard this before, and what you can't. I can't control what happens with interest rates. I can't control what happens with the economy, but there are certain things I can influence, like you said before, your pay rise.
Yeah.
There are certain things I can control, like my spending. But it's just about finding a balance and being realistic with all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have quite a lot of control over what's coming in and out of your bank account. It might not seem like it immediately, and it might take 6 to 12 months to get to a point where you can control that a bit more. But again, yeah, focusing on what you can and can't control, not just staring at your balance in your investment portfolio on a daily basis.
Yes. So how do people afford well life? The Oz Finance thread on Reddit, feel free to stick this podcast in there and hopefully it helps some people that are listening to this thinking exactly what we're thinking about, which is exactly what this person is thinking about. How do you actually afford it all? It comes back to just following some pretty simple steps that can be revealing at first, which we've discovered. It may not be like this forever. Like interest rates might not be this high forever. Inflation might not be this high forever, but it could be here for a little while longer. So it's just about being, you know, mindful, spending intentionally, investing in what you can, keeping those habits, and just trying to be happy while you do it. Speaking of, Kate's book, Buying Happiness. Get a copy. Find a link in your podcast player. Booktopia, Amazon, wherever you get your books, go and check it out. There is a link there in the show notes. Kate, heaps of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.